Hey, Sander here. Do we work too hard? Have bullshit jobs that do nothing but make the rich richer? I think so, and so does my boy, Peter Kropotkin, who was an anarcho-communist in the 1800s. To prove that we work too hard at things that don't benefit humanity, Peter Kropotkin used facts, logic, and stats to calculate the amount of labor hours needed to sustain everyone in Paris. And what he found was a lot lower than the average working week at the time. I figured we have a lot more automation, a lot more mechanization today, and as far as I can tell, no one has updated these calculations for 100 years. So, to try to estimate the benefits of an anarcho-communist utopia, I decided to update Kropotkin's calculations at the end of the Conquest of Bread, and what I found was even more striking. So, if you want to hear about that, stick around. If not, do whatever. I'm not your mom. No gods, no masters, right? Cool. First up, food. This is an easy one. I just literally stole this from an academic paper. Bing, bang, boom. Life is very easy when you plagiarize. I did do the calculations on the hours required per person per year myself, though, and I would like validation for that if you're feeling it in the comments. Next, we have consumer goods, which is a pretty broad category. So I took the 4 highest volume types of consumer goods: electronics, clothing, furniture, and appliances. Now, I will admit, estimating some of these was harder. Many consumer goods are imported into the US, and our consumption is arguably too high, while the rest of the world arguably has greater need of some of these commodities. This might seem to impact the results, but do remember, everything here is precisely entirely accurate. I am 100% objectively correct. And if you notice a flaw, no, you didn't. You're crazy, and gaslighting does not exist. You made it up. You psycho. But yeah, seriously, critical thoughts welcome in the comments. Then there's pharma, which is kind of a funny one because it is a larger industry over time, especially in the US. However, due to distinctly capitalist and very useless organizations like health insurance agencies, doctors spend nearly two-thirds, I can't stress this enough, 2/3 of their hours at work filling out paperwork. Now, to be fair, even in my post-capitalist utopia, yeah, probably medical records are necessary. But insurance vampires demanding triplicate copies of people's STD history is not really core to the survival of the human species, right? That is definitely something that primarily exists to make the CEO of insurance companies money. It is gambling on people's chances to become sick. It's not really that helpful. I imagine a lot of administrative time would be saved if health insurance just disappeared, disintegrated into ash with a hiss with the morning sun. You know, we can only dream. So ignoring that 100+ hours per year, but do keep in mind that this is with vampire levels of paperwork. And frankly, I think this should be around 1/3 of what it is. Okay, now transportation. This one's a little weird because I am kind of convinced I must be wrong about the massive number of bus drivers and train conductors we have in the US, especially given how we've defunded public transport. Did Ian from Synagogue, back when I was 9, design the labor pool? Because, he loved trains. He took me to a trolley museum. It was actually kind of cool. But, I would have expected public transport going down, considering the decreasing amount of funding since Reagan. But Apparently, a lot of people are train conductors, and there are quite a few people working in this industry, and it requires a decent amount of manpower and labor hours. Which, by the way, if you're lefty like me, I apologize for the reflexively misogynist manpower thing. It's just, shorthand. Anyway, category just seems odd. I might be wrong. Then we have the rest. I have less to say about these other calculations, so I'm kind of just going to lump them together. It is my video, and I can be as lazy as I want. My main comment is that they are all a lot lower than I would expect. Hollywood is huge, at least in terms of, dollars. In some ways, I think it goes to show how dollars are far more effective at measuring the relative power of the members of our ruling class than it is reflective of like the actual physical hours of work that go into producing a thing. Entertainment being fewer labor hours than transportation just strikes me as really odd. Education does kind of scam, though, because U.S. public schools are really bad. But this metric does include higher education, which we do have a fair amount of. Utilities, housing, and raw materials just feel like they should have a higher labor cost for a country of our size. With that, we are done. So, drum roll please, what's the big total? Okay, not to blue ball you, but before I show the final tally, I would like to be clear about what I excluded from the calculation and why. I got to give this academic disclaimer. I'm sorry, grad school has ruined me. State and federal employees are pretty obvious. Anarchists don't want to pay cops. Community defense is very different. It's a rotating position, if it exists at all. Leisure and hospitality is kind of a tough one, because it is a level of luxury that a lot of people do expect, but in practice, it's a level of luxury most Americans cannot regularly afford. And frankly, I think most of that sector can be boiled down into essentially spoiling the rich. Financial and business services are, as I've covered before, clearly not needed in an anarcho-communist society without sometimes even money, and certainly without privately owned businesses. Information services could be accomplished by literally just Googling it, in my opinion. Maybe that's my bias coming in. And wholesale and retail trade consists literally of just mostly white people shuffling commodities around in a way that would be very irrelevant in a mutual aid gifting economy. Yep. So those are the big exclusions. Maybe that discounts this calculation, but frankly, they were not that big anyway. Right. So without further ado, we got food, affluent diet, 6.82 hours per person per year. Housing, 4.44 hours per person per year. Building, maintenance, that sort of thing. Education, 1.2 hours per person per year. Entertainment is 15.6 hours per person per year. Utilities is 3.55 hours per person per year. Healthcare/social services are 126 hours per person per year, but could reasonably be 42 hours per person per year if you make doctors do a little less paperwork for insurance. Consumer goods, including electronics, are 31.22 hours per person per year. Transportation, again, surprising, 51.8 hours per person per year. Mining and logging, 6.2 hours per person per year. And the total for the US living standard, with high estimates for each of these categories, is 271 hours per person per year, which translates into 5 hours per week. 5 hours per week. The highest estimate is 1/5 of what Kropotkin, this head-in-the-sky anarcho-communist, could have even wildly imagined back in the 1800s. Let's continue. It can go lower. The total in the US with no managerial positions, or at least no full-time ones, is closer to 192 hours per person per year, or 3.6 hours per week. Finally, the US with luxurious standards and no managers, and a 4-day productivity boost, which is very well documented, where people, when they work less, they are more effective during the shorter times that they do work, right? It makes sense. They don't burn themselves out, is 138 hours per person per year. Did I not calculate it? With the, all right. Well, you're watching me live do the simple arithmetic that apparently I forgot to put in the script. Give me a hot second. I'm probably going to include this because it's like an outtake. I'm human too. And despite what you may think from my impeccable getup of like an old Hawaiian shirt and mussy hair. Right. Okay. And that lowest estimate, which again, frankly, I think there are other places where you could save labor, ways where planned obsolescence is included in our economy and needless waste, and other ways directly caused by capitalism. But within this framework, assuming we don't change production much at its core, we just get rid of industries that don't benefit human beings outside of enriching rich white people, we have 2.6538, etc., hours per week per person. A couple of hours of work. You might be working 20 times harder than you need to. That time, that stress, wearing away at your cells on a molecular level, shortening your lifespan, wearing out your heart. It could be 20 times easier if the whole world wasn't based around pleasing your betters, your superiors. Let that sink in, if you want. I mean, I'm not your mom. I should probably explain the last two. Bonus round. Managers are definitionally kind of redundant in societies where workers democratically self-manage. Sometimes workers' co-ops do elect managers for logistical reasons. However, they are often less full-time positions than in traditionally managed, e.g. privately managed firms. And more humane work weeks, even at 30 hours per week, which is higher than any estimate here, tends to increase productivity by a lot. I also had an extra section about old nannies in Britain, scrubs, and the efficiency of mutual aid, but I will save that for another video. But yeah, right? I mean, like, kind of crazy. 5 hours per week to less than 3 hours per week. These are with generous estimates, with standards in the richest country in the world, based off of official government data for the most part. Imagine what you could do with all that extra time, all the art you can make, all the science you could discover, all the video games you can grind, all the time you can spend with your family when you have time left. You're not going to live forever, right? Time you can spend with your pets, time you could spend just being a human being and not worrying about pleasing an authority. That's a world I'd like to live in. I really would. And it sounds like heaven on earth to me. Hopefully, it sounds like it to you too. Above us, only sky. Imagine all